All right, guys, welcome to the video. Today, we're going to go over a guide to finding a good fighting kingdom, right? So obviously, this is for people that are looking to migrate, but also I'm just kind of talk about some like early game dynamics, some stuff that maybe like once I bring it up, then when you see it, you'll recognize it. Just like an interesting topic to talk about. At the very end, I will introduce my kingdom again, 3092, because we are open for recruiting, right? So obviously, it's like a shameless, not really shameless at all, plug to get some more like good fighters into our kingdom to help us take the next step, right? And it's not a coincidence I use Dragon Ball and also use some like Bakihama in there because like in a lot of these like fighting manga slash animes, right? The characters start small, right? And they're just finding out at a small local level, and then it almost gets like bigger and bigger. And then along the way, they're taking on kind of like the next level challenge. And a lot of times they're actually the weaker ones because they're finding someone stronger. They end up kind of growing into it, finding their next level. And to me, that's what like a good fighting kingdom is about, right? Is that you're almost like always looking to take on the next challenge and to still stay sharp and stay competitive. So I'll talk about why you'll probably end up migrating. I'll define what I call like a good fighting kingdom, some characteristics to look for. We'll talk about some red flags where like if you see this in a kingdom, just don't go there. It's just not a good kingdom. This next one I could have called it a yellow flag, right? Instead I call it's a trap. Whereas there's certain stuff that seems appealing on the surface, but also it's a double-edged sword because like if you don't dig deeper and you kind of just buy into the yellow flag on the surface, it can actually cause instability in the kingdom. Then next we'll talk about green flags, right? Green flags are just stuff where like if you see this, that's a very, very promising sign for a kingdom. And obviously at the end, I'll introduce my kingdom. All right, so if you guys follow, so say for example, Dragon Ball, right? Goku was just a kid fighting like local thugs and like just finding small fries, really. And then as the story progressive, right, he'll always meet new, more formidable foes, and then through the fight with those foes, he ends up kind of like finding the next level. And at the end, he's like saving the universe, saving the world, fighting in different universes, all kinds of crazy stuff. All right. So in general, you'll probably end up migrating if you're a fighter. Well, even if you're not a fighter, right? But like this video specifically, I'm talking to people with like a fighting mentality, the people that like to compete. They like to actually build their account and then kind of test it out against other people. They like to actually work as a group. They like to go through the grind of like the up and down and like the taking on the challenges where they're not sure they're gonna win, but then like through that the hard fights end up finding a way to persevere. Like that's who I'm talking about here. Okay. In general, most kingdoms die, right? If it's in the early game, if you don't have like a jumper group. So a jumper is essentially people that already have experience. They decide to form a group and then like start in a new kingdom at the same time, right? So these people are brand new accounts, but they already have played the game before, and usually they tend to be a little bit more organized, right? There's already a main alliance established, and you compare that to say like a brand new kingdom, where people don't, where it's not a jumper, right? Like if I just started, like I could be the smartest person ever, I could do a bunch of research, but without experience, there's just not like there's just going to be a lot more mistakes that are made, and it's way less likely for a kingdom to survive, right? So when you're starting out brand new, right, more likely than not, you're going to end up in a kingdom without a jumper. And if that's the case, if there's a jumper in like a nearby kingdom, you're like 3550, and there's like a jumper group in a 3551 kingdom, at some point they're probably going to be taking the fighters from your kingdom, and then like your kingdom will end up dying. In general, a kingdom dies when there's no more buy-in for the future, right? There's no hope for the future. So it could be bad leadership. It could be leadership stepping down, right? There's like a vacuum in leadership. You could have a lot of spenders in a kingdom, but if you don't have someone, especially more importantly, like a group that takes responsibility for maintaining all parts of the kingdom, even if the kingdom has a lot of spenders, right? Like there's no leadership, they're going to go to another kingdom with leadership, right? It's also very common for a kingdom to die when like the pillar of the kingdom leaves. So often the pillar is a leader, but also the pillar could just be like a very high spender or like a big fighter, right? Or like a small group of fighters. When one where all of them decide to go somewhere else, the kingdom doesn't really have an ability to reload, which is why recruiting or being able to recruit is really important. I'll talk about later, right? And then like if you lose a pillar, the kingdom kind of dies, right? And then the third one is just taking a loss. So whenever a kingdom takes a first loss, That's a very common time when the kingdoms die. And then a stereotype that's very common is like every month or two, you're gonna see another batch of undefeated, like young, promising kingdoms come through and then take a loss in KVK 5 or 6, and then just kind of fall apart after that, right? The way this game is designed, starting out, very first KVK, right? There's 4 kingdoms, and it's literally just like the 4 kingdoms that are right next to each other, right? So like 35, 51, 52, 53, 54. As you get into KVK 2, 3, and 4, they start matching you up based on like kingdoms in your continent. So there's usually about 30 or so kingdoms. And then KVK 5 is where now you're not protected, only fighting kingdoms in your continent anymore. You can fight anyone. And a lot of these like promising young undefeated kingdoms, their power and even their KP could be like put them, essentially set them up into a matchup where they're fighting kingdoms that are much older, much more established than they are, and they just get completely like destroyed in KVK 5 or 6. And it's very demoralizing because the identity of that young kingdom is that they're the biggest kingdom on the block, right? They're the ones where everyone wants to funnel through. They're the ones where maybe there's a lot of gold chests and, you know, the undefeated. And then when they get exposed in KVK 5 or 6, and it's not really their fault, the game is designed for them to be built that way, they don't recover and they die. Very, very common, right? So if you haven't seen that before, something to start looking out for. Like I'm going to refrain from naming names of any kingdoms besides my own in this video, because one, I don't want to offend people, but two, it's just not a good idea for me to mention kingdom numbers. But when you see young, undefeated kingdoms like lose in KVK 5 and they fall apart, it's not like a one-off thing. It's almost like the next iteration of the Matrix, right? It happens over and over and over. And then finally, I do want to talk a little bit about like a fighter's experience. So like a fighter, you know, a loose definition of mine, it's just like someone that actually enjoys kind of like the RPG aspect of this game, right? You're building up your account, you're building up the commanders, the equipment, the armaments, but then you actually want to test it against other players that are also fighters, right? So as opposed to just wanting to have better stuff than everyone else and you just kind of beat up on other people, you actually want to always kind of move up in competition and fight other people that are also trying to build their accounts. And then a fighter experience, usually, right, more often than not, you're not going to be in a kingdom or with a group that also has the same mentality as you. And at some point, you're going to realize, or you're going to outgrow the group that you're with. And then it's kind of like this journey until you actually almost like find the group that also has like the same fighting mentality as you, and then that's your group, right? A lot of times that's the group you're going to be with, and then when that group kind of disbands, or it kind of has come to the end of the road, then you retire. Or when that group disbands, where you outgrow that group, or they outgrow you, then you have to find another group of fighters that you want to be a part of, right? That's kind of like a very loose definition of, from what I observe, like a fighter's experiences. So then how do I define a good fighting kingdom? I think like if I had to summarize it down into like one sentence, it's that the kingdom allows you to compete, right? So there's being in KVK and winning, and then there's competing, right? And competing is kind of like what I talked about earlier, like Dragon Ball, or like a lot of these like animes or mangas. You're not always the favorite, right? Like, and a lot of times, if anything, you're actually going into something as like an underdog, where at the very least it's like it's even, it's 50-50, you're not sure what's going to happen. And then through like a very tough challenge, you end up almost like growing from it. There's camaraderie built from it, and you reach the next level. It's very important, in my opinion, if you want to be a fighting kingdom, to not go too long without competing, right? So again, without naming any names, there's kingdoms that are staying relatively sharp and competing, in my opinion. And there's kingdoms that people consider fighting kingdoms that, from my observation, I don't even know when's the last time they actually had to really compete, right? And when you go long enough, and this isn't just the game, right? It's working out, it's starting a business, it's doing anything. If you're not always like staying sharp, then you kind of end up like losing your edge a little bit, right? So to me, a good fighting kingdom is a kingdom, one, that allows you to compete, right? They don't do very, very long skips for no good reason. And like maybe they have a KVK where they're not competing, but then it's important for them that for the next KVK, they actually compete, right? Because if you go 2 KVKs without competing, realistically, it's over 6 months for you're actually in a KVK where you compete again, right? So if you take 2 KVKs off, it's at least 6 months before you had like a really challenging like competitive fight. And in my opinion, it's just too long, right? So if you're looking for a good fighting kingdom, find one that's willing to compete and actually understands the importance of competing, in my opinion, right? So what are some red flags when you're looking for a kingdom? One, if a kingdom doesn't have a Discord, that's a red flag. Like, just don't go there, right? So the reason why a Discord is important is because, one, it allows you to start like organizing the kingdom a lot better. You can communicate different things in different channels. So it's just like it's like almost like the engine of how our kingdom is organized, right? So if a kingdom doesn't have a Discord, like it's just hard for them to be very, very organized. And obviously, like as you're getting into a kvk, right, no matter how well someone could do markers, if the group is actually in a voice chat, uh real time communicating in voice, and you have a war lead, it's just going to be a lot more organized than even like markers, right? So if a kingdom doesn't have a Discord, or it doesn't have like an active Discord, to me that's a red flag. Also, if a kingdom has betrayed anyone before and it's still the same leadership group, that's odd. That's out, right? Like, never mind like the morality of it and everything. Like, it takes, it says something about the leadership and really the kingdom, for them to be willing to agree to something and then go back on the word and then like essentially get rewards to get a win that they didn't earn, right? And that's just not a fighting mentality, right? I think I don't have to go beyond that. The other one, and this is probably going to be the most controversial point, is a kingdom is willing to set out a KVK, right? So if they queue into a KVK to not fight at all, or like, or even if like Diplo something doesn't go their way, they just decide they're just going to sit out completely. Like, that one is a little bit more of the gray area. Sometimes like I get the urge to do that, but also if you do that, right, that's again 2 months at the very least, 2 to 3 months, where you as a kingdom just did not compete in that fight. And like, if leadership is willing to do that, or there's like a history of like queuing into kvk and just deciding to sit out, to me that's a red flag. I just don't want to go there. Again, it's sort of controversial because there are actually kingdoms that I consider like competitive fighting kingdoms that have done that before, but in general, I personally will avoid it. And then the last one is Diplo drama, right? So if you go into like the Facebook Rise of Kingdoms page and then other Discord, it's not so much that like if your kingdom was involved with Diplo drama for 1 KVK, it's an issue, right? But at some point, there's a common denominator. If there's a bunch of different kingdoms, but then like this one kingdom always seems to be involved with Diplo drama, then that kingdom, right? There's a common denominator, right? Like if you're always end up, again, I'm talking about like women, right? But if you always end up dating guys that end up cheating on you, right? Like at some point, like you're the one that chose those guys. You're the one that decided to end up in a relationship to get cheated on too, right? I'm not saying it's your fault, but like at some point, like there has to be some responsibility there for what they're doing or how they're selecting their partner to end up that situation, right? And that's kind of how I view Diplo drama. It's not that like, like every kingdom has been involved with some kind of Diplo drama, but there just seems to be some like common denominators where there's like the same handful of kingdoms, well-known kingdoms, that always seem to end up involved with Diplo drama. There's something to be said there, right? And I'm not even talking about this so much for like the morality or ethics standpoint, or like, oh, this is the right thing or not. If a kingdom is always involved in Diplo drama, it's very likely that there's a higher likelihood that they'll end up in a KVK where it's not competitive, right? Whether kingdoms decide to sit out, it's very, very one-sided, or where the matchup was already determined before it even started, right? Like if there's a lot of Diplo drama, like that's very, very common in the KVKs that kingdom is going to be involved in. And if you're looking to get fights and you're looking to compete, it's just a much higher likelihood that you're not going to get it in those kingdoms, right? So avoid the drama, basically. Now, the yellow flags, right? It's a trap. This is something where you want to dig deeper, right? So if you look over here, I have actually Ronda Rousey finding another woman. I don't know who it is, right? But if you guys remember Ronda Rousey from a few years ago, she was like peak of like MMA, right? She literally like brought women's MMA like onto the map. People were literally tuning in to pay-per-view to watch her. She took her first loss, right? Came back, like took a long break, came back, I think fought another time, lost again, and then essentially just didn't fight after that, right? Those are like yellow flags, right? So I'll talk about the Rock equivalent of that. Undefeated kingdoms, like Ronda Rousey was undefeated. Like you have to be careful because it seems like they have a lot of momentum, right? But like there's also a lot of instability because like if a kingdom is like battle tested, they've lost before, they won before, and when they lost, they just came back, they learned, they grew. But there's a lot of stability there, right? But if an undefeated kingdom takes their first loss, kind of like what I talked about earlier, there's actually a high chance that they just won't recover because their identity was being undefeated, right? So when you lose your identity, you can't find a way to kind of like rebrand and come back, you fall apart, right? So it's not so much that undefeated is bad, it's that it's not like there's no downside to it. That's kind of like what I want to get at. The other one is a kingdom with a lot of stars, right? How do they earn the stars, right? Lilith just updated the way they do matchmaking, so we have to see how that unfolds. But before, it's very common for kingdoms to essentially find a way to press down their KP and even like power. So essentially, they're fighting at a seeding that they're way too strong for, right? So then they're constantly in KVKs, essentially being by far like the strongest kingdom, and they could just bully people and have their way. Those kingdoms I wouldn't consider fighting kingdoms. They have a lot of stars, they have a lot of wins, but they didn't really have to compete a lot to actually get those stars. Right. Another one is a kingdom that's known for gold chests, right? And it's again, it's something very very common. I see with like young kingdoms that are undefeated going to KVK 5 or 6, right? Like younger content creators for those kingdoms, they'll make videos. One thing they love to do is show off all the gold chests. That's kind of what they're known for. Then they attract other like gold chest chasers, for lack of a better word. Right? Like the kingdom isn't built on fighting or competition. It's almost like it's built on getting to win KVKs and then getting gold chests. And it's very common again when you go to a kingdom like that, that if they lose or when things are going well, it seems to go well, but when things don't go well, there's no real identity for the kingdom because the identity of the kingdom was gold chests and being undefeated, right? Another one is when a kingdom takes in a very big migration or they merge like another alliance or another kingdom into them. And again, this is not specific just to Rock, right? This happens in real life with like big acquisitions and mergers. But when you have a big migration, so right, like if I'm a kingdom and I bring in a group of like 40 from another kingdom, the 40 have their own culture, they have their own leadership structure, right? I'm not saying like it always doesn't work out, always does work out. That's why it's a yellow flag. It just depends, but it's very common that the two groups, the new group that came into the established kingdom end up almost disrupting the culture of the established kingdom a little bit, and or the leadership structure didn't quite work out, or the culture didn't quite fit, and maybe they have like a good showing for one KVK, but they eventually end up falling apart, right? So again, these are yellow flags. It's not bad. It's just like you also want to understand like there could be a downside to these, and the next one is leadership group, right? So I talked about burnout. You want to be careful with kingdoms with small leadership groups or like there's like one or two people running the whole kingdom, right? Even if they do a great job, because one, the chances of burnout is really high. But when there's a very, very small group, the whole kingdom is almost dependent on that very small group to do a lot of the work and to make a lot of the calls and for stability. And when like one person gets burnt out or they leave, it's very hard usually for someone to kind of like fill that role, and the kingdom falls apart under that. The last two is a long off season, right? So like you can max skip, and we actually had the discussion in the kingdom the other day. Let's kind of we'll switch gears a little bit. We'll talk about say like boxing or MMA, right? If you watch like younger fighters, right, usually they have very like young promising like prospects. They have very high activity. They'll fight a lot of times in a year, and as they get more established, and then as they get older, they make a lot more money. These fighters actually fight less and less often. Sometimes they'll fight like once or twice a year, right? And then what happens when they actually end up losing a fight? Like when your activity level is like one fight or two fights a year, and then you end up losing one of those fights, a lot of times they just end up retiring, where they just don't come back, right? So in my opinion, when you consistently have long off seasons, one, it keeps you less sharp, but also it makes the stake of every KVK a lot higher. right? Because you only get one of these every however many months, and like when it doesn't work out, and a lot of times it's not even the kingdom's fault, right? Because there's crazy stuff that happens in Diplo. You know, Lilith maybe like did matchmaking in a way they made camps that don't really match that well, like for whatever reason. If the KVK ends up flopping from a long off season, the chance of the kingdom falling apart will be a lot higher. Then there is like a higher rhythm of joining KVKs, where like if something doesn't work out, right, like there's just the next KVK. You're not going to wait that long. It's just a little bit, it's a little bit more, for lack of a better word, safe that way. The same thing with competitive fights, right? If a kingdom goes too long, and in my opinion, it's 2 KVKs without a competitive fight, they start not getting that sharp, right? So, for example, I'll make it a little bit more extreme. Let's just say a kingdom has had 4 KVKs in a row without a competitive fight, and they won all 4 of those, right? They're probably still going to get migration, but what kind of people are they actually getting in migration, right? If it's not a competitive fight, right, they didn't really have a chance to start screening out who are the actual contributors and who are the actual fighters, the high activity players, versus like who are the ones that kind of like did their part. Like there's no way to really differentiate that. So one, not only do you, as a kingdom, do you stay less sharp, but also you don't really have like an effective way to start figuring out who will actually show up when times are tough and who's just kind of there because, you know, everything's going smoothly, right? So like in general, I think it's for a fighting kingdom, right? You don't want long off seasons, all right? Like you don't want to do stupid stuff, but you want to actually lean towards the side of being like high activity. And then like you don't want to go too long without competitive fights, right? And often when you have an undefeated kingdom or like a kingdom that has a bunch of stars or won this many stars in a row, you actually will see like they actually had a string of KVKs without a competitive fight. So that's something I definitely recommend you want to dig deeper into. And then finally, we'll talk about green flags. All right. So if you guys don't know who that is, that's Elizabeth Hurley and Bedazzled. I think that's like peak Elizabeth Hurley. Biggest crush on her when I was a lot younger. Still do now, actually. Anyways, when you see these characteristics in a kingdom, that's a very, very positive sign. Okay, so first is that they can recruit. Okay, so kingdoms will recruit for a couple of reasons. One, the kingdom itself has developed a reputation. So, you know, there's only a handful of those kingdoms in the game where if you say the kingdom's name, right, people already kind of like know about them, right? Another one is they have content creators, right? So right now you're watching this video and I'm talking about 3092. All of a sudden it kind of puts on the map. It's easier for us to recruit because relative to another kingdom that has the same profile of us as us, we're probably going to be more well known, even though like we're not a big kingdom, right? And then the third is a kingdom like kind of has like a big spender, or is like known for having a big spender or a group of spenders. Again, that is the yellow flag because on one hand, it could be easy for them to recruit. But on the other hand, they also do they do a good job of actually accepting people that kind of fit like a fighter mentality, that fit the culture, and they're not just accepting people that are like gold chest chasers, things like that, right? The other one is stability, and I put that in quote because really no kingdom is that stable in the game, right? Like any kingdom, no matter how great they are, I could see a scenario where they could die in 2 KVKs, right? Which is actually a little scary. But in general, kingdoms with more stability are kingdoms that are, again, like that have a kingdom identity, that are known for something besides just having spenders, or besides, or really, they're known for something besides just having like high spenders. If the kingdom is just known for having the high spenders, or like a Kraken, there's not really like, there's just too many things that could go wrong where that kingdom falls apart, right? If a kingdom is older, if a kingdom has lost before and then still survive and bounce back stronger, those are all signs of like stability, right? And like in that case, you know, I'm going to make a case against us. Like we don't have a lot of kingdom stability because we're a younger kingdom that is still looking to establish itself, right? So stability is very important, and like is a leadership group like a robust, right? They have like a big robust leadership group that are all working together. So it's way less likely for one person to get burnt out. But even if one person does get burnt out or step away or retire or whatever, it's not like the whole leadership structure is going to fall apart. And then kind of like I talked about that KD identity, right? Your kingdom identity has to be about something other than like you spend a lot of money. If the kingdom identity is you spend a lot of money, that is not a green flag. That is, in my opinion, a yellow and more on the red flag side. then finally, I forgot to put it on here. Uh, when when you're looking at their migration, how are they actually doing their migration? Are they just looking at your stats and that's it, and they accept you, right? Like for us, and I know the other kingdoms do this, we do a voice interview with everyone we accept, right? Maybe on paper everything looks good, they say they spend all this stuff, but then we start talking to this person, and it's like they're not that enjoyable to talk to, or they could probably be a problem, when we're in kvk there's a voice, right? Like the more rigorous the screening process is for a kingdom, right, that means you can trust that like the higher quality of people they're gonna get in, and they're not gonna just take people that maybe the stats look good, but then like as they actually get in the kingdom, other problems arise. So you want a tough screening process for the interview. You want that, right? Because like if you have that in the kingdom, then you could trust that the quality of the people that get into the kingdom is probably going to be a little higher. So I would say that's like a green flag. Right, so finally, let's actually introduce 3092. So for us, obviously, it's a 3000 kingdom. It's a younger kingdom, but we actually moved into that kingdom before this last KBK. So I think it was October-ish when we moved in. So it's still very new as far as the group that's in there. There was 20 something of us that went to this kingdom from 2268, and then we actually brought in about 20 recruits for this first KBK. Right now, if you see on the map here, this is from Fleisch's site, right? So our power heading into last KPK, we're 12.1 bill. Right now, we're at 11.5. Our migration opened yesterday. We currently have accepted 10 people. 5 are in. The other 5 are, they want to hit some sort of achievement in their KVK before they come over. And we're looking to take somewhere between 20 to 25. Ideally, we're going into our next KVK with about 60 to 65-ish like active players, and then we want to kind of go into KVK with that, go through a hard KVK, hopefully grow from there, and then take another group of migrants, right? So we're not going to be a full kingdom, obviously, but like we do want to grow a little bit bigger than we're at now to take on that next challenge. Same thing with the KP. You can see right now, according to Fleisch, we're at 321 bill KP. If everything works out according to plan, I think where we would like to be at heading into the next KVK, and it's going to be the next pop. So around like December 23rd, we would like to be about like 13 bill power, and then about like 400 or 450 bill KP for this next KVK. Vision for this. One, I think a lot of us in 68, the reason why we went over is like we really like the community aspect, and I do feel like we have done a good job of bringing that to 3092, right? It's not very politically correct, right? But it's just people that enjoy being around each other, and then we do have like a fighting mentality where like we want to take on challenges, we want to grow, but like in a smart way, right? So I mentioned like I should have mentioned Dragon Ball before, and also like Bakihama, right? Like, yes, we want to fight something that's a challenge that's appropriate for us, and then we kind of like meet that challenge whether we win or not, and then we kind of learn and then try to grow from there. So that's kind of the vision. So a lot of times people ask you like, what's the long-term vision? I feel kind of silly saying it because the long-term vision is to be the best kingdom in the game, right? But like also a lot of it is actually the fun of going on that journey, right? Like each step of the way, finding challenging fights, right? Taking on challenges, and then seeing if we can like figure stuff out, and then also then adding to the group as we do that. I would say that's kind of the identity right now. We're still newer, so we're still forming our identity. But if I had to put out like a vision for what I hope we become, I think that would be our kingdom identity right now. And then finally, areas to improve on. We're just really small right now, right? So we had going to last KVK about 50 active accounts. About 10 were native, 40 were about like people that migrated in, right? So like that one, we had to do a lot of work in a short amount of time, like organizing the shells. So we have shells ready, right, to drop different forts, to clean up some of the dead weights, or rogues, which for the most part is gone now in our kingdom. And also, when you have that small of amount of people, it's still not as quote unquote stable as it could be. Let's just say we had 50 more people with stronger culture. Right, because like we could lose 5 people, and that's a way bigger portion of the population of the kingdom than say we had 100 people and we lost 5 people. So those are some of the areas to improve, and that's part of the reason why I'm making this recruiting video, so we can actually kind of take that next step. So some of the stuff we're looking for is on here. You can kind of see the Hall of Fame, and I think it's like pretty obvious even looking at all three of these. The community here is very strong, right? Like we joke around, it's a kingdom of baboons, right? It's just like a lot of like silliness and stuff. But like if you actually buy into the journey and the vision, right? So almost think about like like this game has a lot of RPG elements, right? You're building your account, growing. Well, like the kingdom itself is also kind of in an early stage. Like we're not a top kingdom right now, right? But like hopefully you could kind of like buy into the journey and vision. You want to jump in along the way of becoming a top kingdom. One of my favorite quotes by Steve Jobs is that the journey is a reward, and right, and if that really resonates with you, where you want to be part of a kingdom that's has the potential to get there into one of the top kingdoms one day, but is like gonna like work and go through the trials and tribulations and grind to kind of get there, then this kingdom's probably for you. Obviously, for the established accounts that everyone wants, we want them too, right? And usually those are accounts that have like 5 or more marches in a very good place, with the equivalent, the armaments, and the commanders are there, right? Like whatever you do for Crystal Tech is more than adequate to compete at a high level. And then something that probably separates us a little bit from a lot of the top kingdoms is that we're very open to taking promising young accounts, because our timeline's a little bit different. Like we don't anticipate fighting the very top M's the next KVK or the KVK after that, right? So we take like a promising young account that's just out of KVK 4 now. And by young account, I think I've defined probably like something that's like a 1-3 something ID and younger. That fits our timeline, right? Maybe you have less than 5 marches, but like you're a top fighter in your young kingdom, and then like we could see how like as you grow over the next KVK or two, you'll actually grow into like a very valuable competitive member. Those are probably the 2 type of accounts that we're most interested in taking right now. But then most importantly, again, it's somebody that really buys into the vision of this kingdom and is excited to actually jump in at the stage that we're at to help kind of be part of this journey as we grow. All right, so if you are interested in migrating, let's actually go to the title page, right? Our migration Discord is here. If you type in migrate to sv.com and Discord, that will be our migration channel. When you go in there, there will be a place that says apply here. And when you click that, we'll have you open a ticket. We'll answer some questions. We'll have you answer some questions and some screenshots of stuff that we want to look at. And then everything checks out, and then really we do a voice interview. And the voice interview is very important, so we can actually get a good feel of you as a person. Right? You can ask any questions you want, and then we'll accept you from there. Our migration actually opened yesterday, so December 10th, or is it the 9th? I actually don't even remember now. But anyways, opened a day or 2 ago, and it should actually end around like December 23rd when the pop comes up, and we're going into our next KVK, right? So we're literally taking the first pop. We're looking for a challenging fight for this next KVK, just because the last one, it was our first one. We didn't really know what to expect. The fighting ended up actually being easier than we thought it was going to be, so it wasn't very competitive. We did win. We did get the star. We got the Autarch and all that stuff. But this next one, kind of gauging the pulse of the kingdom, and also just some of the stuff I talked to you about, I think it's very important for us to actually like take like a good, challenging, competitive fight to really test ourselves, see what we're made of, and also kind of take that next step on the journey, right? So if all of this stuff appeals to you and then the window kind of lines up, we would love to have you. Right now, we've accepted 10 people, 5 are in. We're looking probably to accept about 20 to 25 total. Definitely apply. And I am also one of the migration officers in our kingdom, so I'll see your application. You can also message me directly in game, 92 bus driver, or the Discord if you have any questions or anything. All right, if you watch all the way to the end, you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to the video. Thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you guys next time.